everyone should have their own, their own personal self and their own
I
culture.
don't like the term blend in. Like, you have your international students have their own identity and culture. They shouldn't have to sacrifice that to be accepted in our university.
I think there absolutely is, and there's a lot of interesting differences which add fun and interesting layers to a relationship.
Why did you decide to study in the UK?
I don't know. I feel like education here is on a higher level than at my country, so that's the reason why.
I was looking for the master's degrees across Europe, UK, and US, and I found the University of Manchester's program for my specialty the most suitable for me.
First thing that comes to mind is the education that UK system offer. Well, I mean, you have, world-class professors coming to teach you, and, it's not that, thing that you can find back in my country.
Because I was studied in Japan about English history and culture, so I decided to come to UK.
Well, this is going to sound funny, I guess, but I mostly came for football reasons. I mean, I support a team in Liverpool, so I had to choose the nearest university. Yeah, so.
It was a bit spontaneous, I guess. I don't know, as a kid, I really liked the UK, and then there was this offer coming through, and I thought, why not? No very particular reason.
I think because both my parents studied here. My dad studied in London, my mom studied in Salford, and so Manchester was kind of close to Salford. Yeah.
Are you guys friends with any local students here, like UK students?
I mean, it's still early days, but yeah, I made some friends in some of the societies, and yeah.
I guess not super deep friendships, but superficial, and then a good friend that's local but not a student.
Yes, I have a few friends here.
And through which ways did you meet your local friends? Like through courses or activities?
We met at the course.
Yes, little.
Okay, so how did you meet them?
I met up them from Lime Cafe at the Summer Assembly building.
Yeah, I can say so.
And how did you meet them?
I think through classes, yeah, mostly. And then I used to live in a student accommodation, so I am friend with my flatmate who is a local. Yeah.
Few. I have a couple.
I would say not a lot, but I know some that I'm really close with.
Through what ways did you meet them?
Through my course?
Not really. No, not friends.
I think I have more international friends than UK friends, but I try to surround myself with diverse people, so it's probably 40% of my friendship groups.
I am. Through what ways did you meet them? Through my course, through friends of friends, sometimes even through societies. On a scale of 1 to 10, how close are you and your local friends? That's a good question. I would say in first year, I was probably on a scale of 8 or 9 with them, but this year, I think I've decided to gravitate more towards international friends, and so I'm less close with them now, maybe 5 or 6.
4 or 5 maybe.
4 or 5?
Yeah.
Maybe 5 or 6.
I can say 7, yeah.
I think maybe a 4 or a 5 or something, yeah.
On average, I guess, because there's both extremes, but then I'd say a 6 or so.
Are there any differences in communicating between local and international students?
I think it's mostly because of the background, and so the most noticeable difference between me and the local friend, I think is about tradition. So how we communicate with each other in terms of, for example, with the local friend, I only hang out with them in like pub settings, but like with the people from my country or like Asian in general, I used to like eat with them and then like gathering, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Actually, I'm much closer to international students than local students because they can understand each other about like how we feel about our country or something like that.
To an extent. So, like, it's because I'm Indian ethnically as well, just to be clear. So, I'm like Asian and also Australian. My best friend is British Chinese. So, she's like, even though she's British, she's also Chinese and she understands that culture, and the way we connect is through that cultural like similarities. So, I would say I have like one British English friend, and he's just very eccentric, and he's like, I have a lot in common with him because he also like is perpetually confused by Britain existing. So I wouldn't say I have a lot of common with them, but I only do because of their specific traits outside of their British identity, if that makes sense.
Well, the first thing that I noticed was that people are a fair bit younger here when they start university. So like a lot of people that I meet and interact with are a couple years younger than I am. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the same. But then it's a bit more, I feel it's a bit more friendly, a bit more outgoing, and yeah, a bit more attractive in a sense than
I think there are like a lot of nuances for local students that international students might miss. So for example, when I first came, some things are like they would talk about places that they've been, like chains, restaurants, companies and such that were like popular here, that I didn't really catch on to and took me a while to learn. I think there's also a huge difference in terms of the way that international students and local students view money. Obviously, majority of international students, unless they have a scholarship, are self-funded, so usually come from a more like upper middle class background. So that's quite different from some local students who they would talk about like student finance and things like that. And whereas like I recognize like as an international student, I'm very privileged to have the support of my family. So I think there's quite a cultural difference in understanding there, and I kind of have to be like sensitive to what budgeting is like as someone who's on student finance, rather than like myself who is kind of like supported by my family, and I am not as in charge of my own finances yet, in a way.
Have you experienced any cultural shocks in Manchester?
Yeah, I would say so, definitely.
I wouldn't say exactly too similar, but the things that they do and I do, they are not like totally outlandish for me, so I accept it. It's okay for me.
Actually, not so much, because Japanese and UK people are like similar mind or like characteristics, so I think it's not so much difference.
Yeah, I can say so. Yeah.
So like in terms of food and like festivals, you can find some difference.
Yeah.
To an extent, I mean, Australia is English speaking.
Yeah, that's true.
But the dialect's different, and I have to change my language and stuff. It has houses.
That's true. Yeah.
The roast vegetables, I guess. I'm really trying here. The roast vegetables, that's what I'm going to go with. That's my final answer. Sometimes we have roasts in Australia, like roast meat, but it's different. But it's similar enough.
That's true.
No, I wouldn't say no. I mean, it's like pretty much how I mentioned it would be. Like,
Yeah, for like real shocks, I wouldn't say so. This is also, you hear a lot about England and the UK, I guess.
Sure. Well, it was a shock. It wasn't the easiest transition, I would say. I think it's still like part of the European kind of, it wasn't a complete, like, distinct country, and I learned a lot about it in my high school. But when I came here, definitely the culture is very different. British people are way more formal and indirect in the way they speak, and the food is very different. And yeah, I think the atmosphere.
I guess definitely the way that you're able to express yourself is a lot more liberating in Asian countries, especially in Malaysia, I think, and where I'm from. And I also live in Brunei, so those kind of places you have to be more conservative, more aware of how you sort of dress and present yourself, and you don't want to like stand out from the crowd too much, don't draw too much attention from yourself. And that's something my parents always echo as well, like you need to follow the culture, follow the customs, don't draw too much attention to yourself in terms of how you dress. But here you can dress sort of however you want, and people won't really say anything because nobody pays that much attention to you. And also such as things like showing skin or wearing very low clothes in the summer is quite normalized here. Things like sexuality is quite a big normal topic. No one really blinks an eye in terms of when you say you have a girlfriend, or if you don't identify in the gender that you were born with, for example. So people kind of don't really treat that as big of a deal. Also, I think another thing is like disability is not treated as much of a big deal here compared to in Asia. I think in Asia, a lot of times if someone is disabled, people tend to have a more like alienate them more and things like that, whereas here it's very much more integrated into the society. Though I know there's a lot more that we can do, and a lot more that even like in Manchester that can be done for people who are like differently abled.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what extent do you feel a sense of belonging in the UK?
I would say 3 or 4.
I guess 6.
Well, that's a difficult question, I think, but I mean, like maybe a 7 or an 8, or yeah. Yes.
7 or 8?
Yeah, I love it here, so.
Yeah, I would have said, I mean, I really like it, but I guess more like a 4.
I'm not too sure. I'm quite mixed about this. I think with a lot of my friends who have experience with like international people, or who have parents who were immigrants, I feel more at home with them. But I think like in terms of with people who are like completely like all their family have lived in the UK and they've never been out, it's a little bit harder, but I can still get along with them. We can still talk about certain things. It's just we're missing that context of them knowing things like, oh, stereotypes from different kinds of cities, and I don't really know about the stereotypes, so I wouldn't really get those kind of jokes. But I feel pretty at home, I would say. I think I find the language a lot easier because I'm a native English speaker. My parents speak English, so back home I find it hard to communicate with government officials and things like that because my Malay is quite poor. But here I find it really easy to communicate in English, so I think it's a lot easier for me compared to back home in terms of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I 對自己嘅 self identity 都係有所疑惑。我唔知應該標籤自己做一個外國留學生啦，喺英國定居緊嘅香港人，定係以一個旅居嘅身份存在喺外國地方呢？可能因為我嚟咗英國讀書之後，對歸屬感呢一樣嘢出現咗一個問題，就係當我以為喺英國讀書，暑假可以返香港好開心，終於可以返屋企嘅感覺，但係當我返到屋企嘅時候，發現好多嘢都已經變咗，家已經好似唔係家嘅感覺。朋友、屋企人喺呢1年我離開嘅 時間都改變咗好多，都有自己嘅生活，都有唔少嘅改變。香港呢個地方亦都好似變得唔再係我離開之前嘅模樣。咁究竟呢個家仲係咪我嘅家呢？而我仲係咪屬於而家呢個世代嘅香港人呢？但係反過嚟睇，我喺英國，我都感覺自己都仲係一個外來人嘅身份，始終係亞洲人面孔啦。我嘅母語亦都唔係英文，亦都講唔到一口好流利嘅英文，根本好難去可以同到啲 local 加入到佢哋平時 social 嘅話題。而我自己感覺都好似好難融入到英國年輕人嘅圈子。我身邊嘅朋友最 close 嘅可以傾心事嘅，都係只限於講廣東話嘅香港人。咁究竟其實我嘅身份係啲咩呢？我都仲喺度發掘